Very warm welcome to this virtual gathering. My name is Christine Robinson and I am thrilled to be with you today to celebrate conservation in 2024 with WWF's leaders. We will be recording this session. However, as an attendee, your video and sound isn't being recorded, so please feel welcome to get as comfortable as you like. If you have any trouble with your audio or visual, you can contact us using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We will try to help you, but if we cannot help, do not worry, we'll be sharing the recording with everybody registered after the event. Today's session will be a conversation. If you have any questions at all, please send them through using the Q&A button. We will attempt to answer as many as possible throughout the conversation, and any extra after the event as well. Thank you to those who have already sent through their questions. I'm now very happy to hand the mic over to Cliff Cobbo, WWF Australia's First Nations Principal Advisor, to formally open our gathering today with an acknowledgement of country. Over to you, Cliff.
Thank you, Christine. First of all, we'd just like to acknowledge on all of the traditional lands and waterways in which we live. I join you today from the lands of the Cobbo peoples up here in Townsville. I pay my respects to the elders past and present, and also would like to acknowledge and extend that respect out to any other First Nations peoples on the call here today. I'm going to open up this morning. It's been a busy morning for me this morning, being a panda. I've been with WWF now for 17 odd years and absolutely love it. I got up at 7 to get on a call at 8 o'clock with our senior exec and our board to speak all things risk. After that, I jumped on a call with some of our good friends in Papua New Guinea and also our Pacific office to talk about COP and one of the initiatives that WWF's involved in, which is our Oceanic First Voices. I then jumped on a call with Nick and others to talk about a regenerative economy. And now I'm with you, my good friends. So what an absolute wonderful start to the day. And one of the things that grounds me and centres me when it comes to the wonderful organisation I work for and why I've stayed around as a First Nations Principal Advisor is the fact that we all have a story to tell, because storytelling is important, not only for those who tell them, but more importantly for those who want to listen and learn from them. And WWF is very proud to now have some ambitions and targets around First Nations involvement in our strategies. So that comes with the story to trade in trust and respect when we go out to those communities. My philosophical view on caring for country and the environment, on nature and this wonderful place we all call home, is the fact that First Nations peoples, and it's similar to when I do have these discussions with First Nations peoples around the world, it speaks to our philosophical view, and I coin it in this phrase, is that people and country, we are one and the same. We did not come into this world, we came from it, and there's an undeniable truth to power, no matter how important you think you are, that each and every one of us will return to it. This country within countries here in Australia, which speaks to our story, our ancient story, had a dream, had many dreams a long, long time ago. Dreamt of spirits, animals, plants and people. It dreamt of rivers, oceans, mountains, islands, deserts and reefs and everything in between. And have a guess what, my friends, those dreams came true. That's why I'm here today, because my people and my country became the reality of those dreams. It speaks to people and country are one and the same. And you know what? You can hear and see the story each and every day. Each and every day. We just don't bother to look or listen anymore. We're too busy with ourselves. But this story has been told and will continue to be told by our greatest storytellers, which is our elders. So what I would ask you to do is that I'm not going to do a PowerPoint slide, but I'll quickly tell a yarn, a quick story. And if you want to imagine this story by closing your eyes, and I'll tell you when to open them back up. But it's my worldly view of why I work for the Panda, why we want to engage with First Nations peoples, and why we want to be part of a global network, a global story to look after this place we call home. The story of people and country are one and the same. You can see this story in the eye of a Gundai, a cassowary in a rainforest, on Juru country in the wet tropics. I've seen this story on the smile of a crocodile on the banks of the Maningrida River in Kakadu National Park in the Northern Territory. You can see it on the ripples of a river rounding a bend, and you can hear it in the rush of a breeze through a gum tree. You can hear it in the cry of a curlew, the laugh of a kookaburra, and the howl of a dingo. You can smell and taste this story in the smoke when we burn country the right way. I've seen this story and heard this story in the breath of a humpback whale breaking with its calf between Gari, Fraser Island, and the mainland. You can hear this story in the clapsticks and the mesmerising hum of the didgeridoo and the pulsating beat of the warrap, the Torres Strait Island drum, when we sing about and welcome you to country. I felt it so many times on a cold winter's morning when I lived on Ngunnawal country in Canberra. I see it in the eyes of my two sons who are growing into two fine young men, and we hear it in the voice of their mother when she sings the songs of her father, a proud Muggeram man who was born on a small island, Rennell Island, in the Torres Straits west of Mussig. You can see it in the majestic flight of the wedge-tailed eagle as it looks down on its domain, and I've seen it in the biggest mob of Gulbury emus dancing across my mother's Niambar country just outside of Brewarrina when I was a child. You can open your eyes now and look at me, because I hear and see this story each and every day, my friends, when I look in the mirror. When I look in the mirror, people and country, people and nature, we are one in the same. Always was, always will be, my friends. This is our gift to you. This is our gift to you, our stories, our art, our songs, our history, our culture, our dance, our knowledge. Why do we do this? We do this because you are here. You are here. You are now. And you too call this ancient place home. So that's the yarn I like to tell. I get out and talk of all things Panda and the wonderful work we do. And I want to congratulate you, each and every one of you, in your support, in your giving, because there is a responsibility in giving and also a responsibility in receiving. That algorithm, that transaction, that trading in trust and respect speaks to a common value that's agreed upon when you give to us and we receive and we do work on your behalf. It's very important. That's one of our key values that we try to live up to and espouse and deliver on each and every day. So I want to thank you sincerely from the bottom of my heart during my 17 odd years with WWF, for us to continue this work, to have impactful change, to be transformational, to be catalytic, to deliver a national program, a national story, but more importantly, a story whereby we are reaching out and touching the hearts, minds, and souls of other human beings across this wonderful place we all call home. So on that monologue, I think I've used up a little bit of time here, but that's why I do what I do. And I want to now pass over and introduce you to our Chief Regenerative Officer, Nicole Forrester. Nikki.
Thank you so much, Cliff. Gee, you're a hard act to follow. So I just want to say thank you for sharing your beautiful yarn with us all and taking me to a very special place as I closed my eyes and listened and had your words of wisdom wash over me. So I feel very lucky to be here and to have received the yarn as you so freely and generously shared it with us today. Hello, everybody. I am Nicole, Nick Forrester. I am a proud Wiradjuri woman. My mob is from the central west of New South Wales. It's known as Plains Country, but I live on Quandamooka Country on the bay side of southeast Brisbane, which is saltwater country. And today I am joining you on this call from Turrbal and Yagara country here in Meanjin, also we call Brisbane, which is on the river, so freshwater country. So I feel very honoured that I get to be and occupy and live in multiple places and expressions of country through who I am and where I'm from and where my mob is from and who I am and where I live and work. And I'm very generously welcomed in these spaces. As Cliff said, I am the Chief Regenerative Officer, and I am the baby panda today because I only joined WWF Australia on the 1st of July this year, so still very young in my panda life. And I wanted to share with you a little bit about myself and how I came to be here in this role and what that role means to me. When I learned about this role being available, my immediate and visceral response, I had a physical reaction to the title Chief Regenerative Officer, was one of hope and excitement. And I felt that hope because I had been away from Australia for a long time. My career had taken me overseas and worked in North America and the Pacific and Japan. And when coming home because of the pandemic, things had shifted here, and I wasn't quite able to identify what it was that felt different about being back in Australia as an Aboriginal woman working in sustainability and environment. And then when I saw this role and this title, Chief Regenerative Officer, and then I did my little research into the strategy behind that and really the articulation of where WWF Australia decided that it wanted to shift its work while remaining true at its core to what we've always done, which is care deeply about country and the flora and the fauna and the animals and the habitats and the landscapes, and that we operate across all of these spaces and more. And that idea of regeneration is around moving our thinking to this holistic frame of beyond protect, beyond restore, one that encompasses investment in a different way of doing, one that recognizes the balance between humans and nature and that investment that's required for us to thrive together in harmony. And that strategy at a global WWF level has really shone through locally in WWF Australia, and I could see that in the way that the work was being done. So when I was given the opportunity to join WWF Australia and take on this new role to help guide and continue the innovation that we are already doing and the great impact that we are already having, I got really excited and hopeful that we could deliver this very big, hairy, audacious goal that we have to regenerate nature by 2030. I didn't arrive here in a vacuum. I've been a few places before getting here, but what those places taught me really was about this intersection of the work that we do. And Cliff mentioned this about nature and people, we are one. And country and people are one. I've been saying for a very long time that mob, which is what Aboriginal communities call ourselves, we don't live our life in silos. We are a part of the land and the country and the salt water that we come from, and we return to it, as Cliff so beautifully reminded us. And so when I saw the work that WWF was doing to integrate that thinking in how we care for our threatened species and how we protect our trees and how we look after our oceans and create safe spaces, corridors for on land and in the ocean, that this made sense to me personally in the way that I could see the world and the way that humans travel through the world. And it was a light bulb moment that all of the pieces of the puzzles that had come in my work before in government, in the non-profit sector internationally, working with climate adaptation in the North Pacific communities, through to the corporate sector, working on sustainability, that each of those experiences brought a piece of the puzzle for the niche where WWF is working so beautifully, which is nature, climate, and communities. And so it was a very easy decision for me to come and join the WWF Australia team. And it wasn't until after I arrived and was thinking about where did my passion for and nature come from, and for country, beyond just my cultural background. Was there a turning point when I realized that caring for country was going to be something more than what I did because of my personal connection to country, but it was actually going to be professionally significant? And I thought back hard, and I remembered this one moment, and I just wanted to share with you this story. Now, you might see Dermot laughing because he knows how much I love camping, but maybe this will make some sense. So I had to move a lot when I was a young one, and I moved all the way from North Queensland to Adelaide to Melbourne and Brisbane and back in between. And so I started new schools every couple of years. What that did was gave me a great connection to lots of different communities around Australia and lots of different countries. So I'm equally comfortable in the ocean on the Great Barrier Reef as I am in the mountains of Victoria in the snow country. And there was this one new school I'd just started in, and just after I'd started, and I hadn't kind of got my new friends yet, I was still connecting to the local place and the local country, the local nature, and I got told we were going on a camping trip for a week. And it wasn't just like one place camping. It was actually, we were moving down a river towards the ocean. So it was fresh water, it was salt water, it was rainforest, it was other types of ecosystems in this 7-day moving while camping trip. And I loved being in nature on country all of the time. I loved that experience of hearing the birds and seeing the platypus and hearing the cassowary scratch. And it was defining for me that I recognized I had to help protect, restore, and now I have a new word, regenerate this nature, because it's truly the intersection of where humans and nature can thrive together. And it wasn't until I got to WWF and I was looking at some of the partnerships that we have, and I was thinking about that experience, that 7 days of camping and moving, different campsite every night, that I realized that the where of that camping happened in the Girigan National Forest. So for those of you who have been long-time WWF supporters, you may have already heard about the very long 2-decade-plus collaboration and partnership that we have with the Girigan Aboriginal Corporation, which their headquarters is just south of Cardwell in far north Queensland. And I recognized that I had this kind of defining moment about my life's work in the Girigan National Park, which is one of the foundational relationships that we have at WWF. And so that made me feel extra proud of the work that we're doing here and my connection to it. And I could tell from the very first day that this team and the work that we do and the supporters that we have are very special. And I continue after almost 6 months to bring that excitement and hope to work every day. And I'm so looking forward to the opportunity to have a discussion with you and hear your questions. Thanks very much. I think over to you, Dermot.
Good. Thank you so much, Nicole, and thank you so much, Cliff. That has been two sort of amazing personal journeys and reflections on not only the past, well, 6 months for you, Nicole, but past few years for you, Cliff, but also on your own personal journeys as well. So thank you so much for sharing that with us today. For those of you that have not joined these sessions before, I am Dermot O'Gorman. I'm the CEO of WWF-Australia. It's been more than a year since I've done one of these panels. I think this is the 4th one for 2024. And it's always such a pleasure to have a deep dive into the work that we're doing to be, and it's particularly this time to celebrate a year of both wins, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, but also some things we didn't win, and I think that's part of the journey as well. But I wanted to start with a quote, and then I'm going to come back to Nicole and Cliff, and we're going to have a bit of a discussion about some of the really amazing things or insights that you've talked about in your presentations. But I'm constantly struck by a quote by the American anthropologist Margaret Mead. And, there's the famous one about, never underestimate the power of one person. But she has another quote, which I think for this time is really relevant. It says, "The world is full of amazing opportunities that are brilliantly disguised as unsolvable problems." And for me, the power in this is not that the world is full of opportunities that are challenges and you should just seize them. It's the fact that they're brilliantly disguised as unsolvable problems. And so people give up and say, well, we're never going to fix that challenge. And I think the power of, and I think both Nicole and Cliff used this word, the power of hope is really, really important here, because without a vision of where we want to go, without hope that we can get there, then everything just seems like an unsolvable problem. And I think that that's really what I want to go to. So thank you for all joining today. We had 384 participants sign up for this end of year session. So you are our superpower. I know Cliff and Nicole both talked about this, but without you, we would not be able to do the work that we're going to do. And so I'm gonna start with Cliff as an experienced panda, and Nicole, I'll come to you second. But Cliff, you talked at the beginning about something called Oceanic First Voices, that you'd been on a conversation this morning with P&G in the Pacific. Do you want to just tell our amazing supporters a little bit more about that? And some of them may have heard about Australia's bid to host COP31, which is the climate COP in 2026. So maybe just tell us, what do you think has been quite impactful by that work, and what do you think some of the opportunities are going forward into this next year?
Thanks, Dermot. The one thing that's really excited me over my last 3 or 4 years in my new role as a First Nations Principal Advisor is the commonality and the challenges across the whole of this planet when it comes to the question of people and nature and the relationship of that. We've redefined our ambition and our calling card, dare I say, for the 21st century, WWF. Internationally now, where part of my job is want to go out and storytell and broker and be that change agent of change, is the fact that WWF International has now decided to use the line whereby we're putting people at the centre of conservation. So I think that's really impactful. I agree with the science. We need the science and the facts and the evidence to support why we're doing what we're doing when it comes to theory of change, when it comes to the, dare I say, the engaging civil society, but also there's that word change, Dermot, I think. And I think it was Carl Jung who said, you can't change anything until you accept it. Well, I'd add to that, if we don't accept or indeed create change, change will create you. And that's what this human-induced climate change crisis is doing to us now. It's changing who we are, where we live, what we eat, how we produce our food. It's changing our infrastructure, our energy needs, our livelihoods in many parts of this world. When I go on to, excuse me, when I do jump onto those calls with pandas from around the world, it's changing our access to clean drinking water, that fundamental right for one's existence and in one's reality. And the panda's at the forefront when it comes to changing and propositioning those supply chains, the infrastructure, the thought leadership in all of those spaces and places that matter. So in terms of the word impact and the fact that WWF is a thought leader in those spaces and places and conversations that matter, that's been really, really transformational for me in terms of my new role and having that international frame, if that sort of answered some of your question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I might come back to a couple of elements there, Cliff, because that's
Yeah.
great. But Nicole, I love the traveling down the river in Regenerative Country.
Mm.
Can you tell us a little bit about, in your first 6 months, you've been out on country in quite a few areas with WWF projects. Perhaps just share that experience with our supporters and what's really struck you as being impactful.
So the impactful piece is our enduring relationships, and that we're listening to country, obviously, and we're listening to communities all across Australia, as well as the work that we're doing in Southeast Asia and the Pacific. And I think that is why the work that we are doing in partnership is so impactful and really creating that shift that we need to, because we recognize that regenerating nature it's more important. It's also more difficult, more challenging than perhaps other styles of conservation, which were perhaps looking to preserve and conserve nature without including communities in the use and the living and the experience of nature. And so when I've been out working and seeing the work that we're doing through these partnerships, the thing that keeps coming up is that we're a catalyst for people in their local communities to engage in nature. So if we're talking about First Nations communities, the ways that we've been engaging in nature for tens of thousands of years, so really helping perhaps where some of those practices have been disrupted. So I was just thinking about some work that I got to meet our partner from the Northwest Kimberley last 2 weeks ago when I was over in Western Australia. So we've had another very long partnership in the Kimberley region, almost another 2 decades of collaboration there that's really grown and shifted in the way that our understanding at WWF is seeing the complexity of the relationships that people have with nature, and that it's not just through this kind of one experience. And so that allows us to make these collaborations which really bring meaning for people in the way that they need it to. So let me be really specific. There was a project that we're really proud to have been doing for a number of years now around cultural burning practices. And that's been in multiple places across Australia with multiple different First Nations ranger groups. And now the most recent conceptualization of that is how do you take that practice and make it a landscape view, which is how the traditional owners have been using fire, and how do you recognize the positive impacts of cultural land management practices, burning, but others as well, in a systems approach. And I think that that's really important because it demonstrates these, you might have heard, supporters might have heard of nature-based solutions. And these nature-based solutions allow people and nature to have a positive impact and adapt to the climate changes by taking that systems level approach. So that's only possible because of the partnerships and the collaboration and the trust that we've built over really long periods of time, and our understanding of our partners' needs and aspirations for their future. And that's only possible because of the supporters that we have, that they trust that we're doing the work in the right way with the right partners.
Good. And then that theme of partnership has come up over and over again. And as you have both said, Cliff and Nicole, that a lot of those partnerships are 10, 20 years in the making, both with First Nation partners, but also with communities around Australia and around particularly the Asia Pacific. And so if I build on that partnership piece, Cliff, you've been with WWF now about 16 years. But, you know, working with partners can also be challenging, all types of partners, both partners that you fundamentally agree with, but also partners that sometimes you disagree with, the sort of thing, but you need to work towards a common solution. So some lessons out of your many years of experience, Cliff, around what can be challenging around partnerships, and how do we work to get a common vision? You talked a bit about dreaming. How do you work to get a common vision of where we all need to go together to make this planet healthy and thriving for both people and nature?
How much time have we got, Dermot? Look, what we're saying, I mean, the words matter. You've heard me say this before, but we need to translate our words into action, but more importantly, translate our values, because it's our common values that will solve our problems for our common good. And I think the one thing that I've learned and why I've stayed with the Panther is that we espouse and live up to our values, the values of our partners, the values of those who want to give to us, to live in a sustainable way, but more importantly, where we do no harm to this place we all call home. The challenge, I think, is the vested interests that play their role in society. We all know and hear and see those things all day, every day. I'm not going to speak to it, but the fossil fuels and the different multi-sectoral sort of challenges that as a world-leading environmental organisation that we're all aware of, you know, on our side of the fence. But I think the most challenging thing for us is to once again tell that story, build a narrative whereby people want to invest in and be a part of a story that delivers a healthy planet, because there is no other. We're not going to any exoplanet on Orion's belt or Andromeda or Mars anytime soon. This place is what we've got. And I think Carl Sagan said it quite beautifully when in his Pale Blue Dot speech, like it or not, Earth is where we make our stand. And what really resonates with me, which speaks truth to power in terms of the human endeavour, was when he said, and it continues to be the question for us in humanity, when he said, don't expect help anytime soon to help us from ourselves. So this is all on us. That's the challenge.
Yeah, and I think that's a great summary, Cliff. We're all in this together, and despite our differences, our common things that make us common between us are far greater and outnumber all the differences. So 100% agree. Now, Nicole, you talked a little bit about your journey before you joined WWF, and you have, for those of you who go online and looked at Nicole's LinkedIn, you'll see that she was both with CSIRO, which is Australia's leading science innovator. And I know you've done lots of innovation, work on innovation over the years. So I thought in order to solve some of these problems, we have to go back and search for some of the foundations from First Nation knowledge and from sort of wisdom in the on country that Cliff has talked about. But I think innovation and technology also play a role. So I was just sort of keen to see, looking forward over the next sort of Yeah, what innovations have you got excited about that WWF and its partners are doing?
So thanks. I love the concept of innovation allows us to take forward wisdoms from thousands of years ago and knowledges, because knowledges about how to do things are technology. And sometimes we think about technology as where we are today, like maybe this little iPhone that lives and breathes right next to me everywhere, what I'm doing all of the time. And so what I'm really excited about with what the work that's coming up is that we take forward the really valuable things that we know about nature and our environment and what's changing, and harnessing new ways of thinking and new tools to make sense of that, and to make sense of it in multiple levels. So I think that's one of the things that I've really come to learn and understand and love about WWF in the last 6 months, is that we do incredible work on the ground with species and with local communities. And we also do incredible work advocating, so nature laws and on global treaties, and we do incredible work at regional levels. And when you insert that idea of innovation and harnessing new technologies alongside all of those knowledges that we really have, then we can amplify and accelerate, because we do have nature and climate crises that we're dealing with. So we have to have that sense of urgency, and the technology and the innovative ways of thinking and doing really allow us to accelerate some of those solutions, and therefore our impacts, positive impacts on climate and nature. So if I had to pick a couple of things, like specific ones, because there's so many things I could talk about, because you can tell already I'm like, oh my goodness, I want to just do a complete download on this. But so I think there's a really interesting piece of work that's happening at a very large scale. And so that's why technology is really exciting, because it can take a large amount of data that we had. So this is specifically around creating safe spaces for whales to move across their migratory routes throughout the year in a safer way, so to reduce some of the risks and hazards to whales, which we already know what they are, but to actually take these huge amounts of data sets and bring them together and create the scientific underpinning for things like new shipping routes, because we know where the whales are at what time of year, and just a little bit about how we need to move the shipping routes. So this idea of using technology to inform decision making by others, so that's a decision by the shipping lines and corporates and governments, but taking our scientific knowledges and presenting them in a way, as Cliff says, to create that story and narrative around why this is important. And I think that sometimes people get a little bit scared of technology and scared of data, because sometimes there's just so much data out there. So where I'm excited about is that bringing together of the knowledges with the technologies in a way to create story that changes decisions and changes the environment for a nature positive outcome. So that's one. If I had a couple of minutes, I'd talk about some really incredible work that we're doing just not far offshore here. So until Dermot gives me the no, you're done. You can't. Okay, I'm good. Okay. So, and this also speaks to the power of the panda being a global organization and being able to really connect the dots between global issues like climate change and local aspirations for how to care for country. So not far from where I'm sitting right now and where I actually live, which is Quandamooka country, there is an island called Minjerribah, and some people might know it as North Stradbroke Island. And on the island, there are First Nations people that have been living there for a long time, but there are also other communities, and the collaboration between these communities is really incredible. And this idea that the communities, regardless of whether or not they lived on the Aboriginal corporation traditional lands, or if they lived in town on other types of lands, that everyone wanted to get together and agree about how to care for country by using cultural fire practices. So here's where the big connecting the dots bit comes in. So there are koalas, a very important koala population on Minjerribah. They're genetically distinct from the mainland koala population, so they're a really important population. And with you using cultural burning practices, you have to be careful about where the koalas are before you burn. So how do we use technology? Well, our colleagues from WWF in Denmark had some technology which they brought to Minjerribah and taught the rangers on the island how to identify where the koalas were so that they could work out where to burn next. So talk about global to local to global again. I just love that innovation of using technology alongside traditional knowledges for the benefits of everybody in that community on that island. I'm really excited to see where that work goes next.
Thanks, Nicole. That's two great examples about innovation, both at different scales and using different blends of technology innovation, but also working with community and First Nations and scientists innovation on the ground as well. So thank you for sharing both of those. It does remind me, and so I might tell a personal story myself, because I wanted to bring a couple of themes together, and one of those is about partnership. The other is about being hopeful and I think ambitious about how we need to regenerate and move beyond just conserving what we've got, but to be able to bring back in a way that's sustainable and regenerative. And this idea that Cliff talked around change, but often that type of change takes time. And so, there often is no magic bullet. Driving change is hard. And probably those of you who've looked on my LinkedIn post will realize I've been with WWF quite a long time. I used to run WWF China in Beijing for 5 years. In the late 2007-8, we worked with the Heilongjiang province in China to work on a plan to bring tigers back into China, which were extinct. And this is up on the Russian border, where there was a reasonably healthy population of tigers. And that process took us 3 to 4 years to work out a plan that could create a habitat in which tigers could move back across the border into China, and that it would be able to be sustained by the ungulates that they needed, but also to be able to manage that population with the local communities who live there. There were no tigers in 2007. By 2010, there was reports of 2 to 3 tigers coming across the border regularly. Today, there are more than 50 tigers in the Chinese in Heilongjiang province that live and then move across into the Russian Far East. And that's a great story in its own right. And it's taken WWF working in partnership with the local province, with a number of other conservation organizations, with the local communities to deliver that. But it's part of a much broader piece of work that we did that led up to 2012, where we said we needed to double the number of tigers in the wild, because there'd been a crash in that previous decade where illegal poaching had really forced tigers. It was on a downward spiral. And if we didn't intervene hard to bend the curve, tigers would have gone extinct. 12, 13 years later, we have celebrated pretty much reaching double the number of tigers. WWF worked with an alliance of 12 countries in a tiger alliance with about 10 to 15 other NGOs to deliver that doubling of tiger numbers. And the nice part to that from an Australian viewpoint is WWF Australia, through its supporters, has been the third largest office in WWF to support those tiger numbers. So often you could say, well, we're a big network, and that was something that we delivered as a network, which is true, with officers from all over the world, probably 25 WWF officers working both on the ground, on policy, and doing fundraising with our supporters. But Australian supporters were the third most generous in our network. And so that doubling tiger numbers is on you. That's something you guys helped us to deliver in a very concrete thing. And it's tigers on the ground managing those populations with local communities, bringing back the ungulates and working on a future of hope for tigers, whereas a decade and a half ago, it was very bleak. And so that's a sort of personal story that motivates me when I look at really tricky problems and say, how are we going to work together to solve those? Now, I'm conscious of time. Nicole, I wanted to come back to one question to you and then one question to Cliff, which I'll ask you to be reasonably short on, because I also am going to prompt questions in the Q&A box. Christine and I are going to monitor them. And so I'm going to start to bring, she and I are going to start to bring them into the conversation. So please do get your question in there. And we really want to hear from you on anything we've talked about or anything else that you'd like us to sort of really chat about. So Nicole, you talked about that niche around nature, climate, and communities. Why is, you're new to WWF, why is that a niche that is different, that you think is a powerful one?
It's different because not a lot of organizations are able to think about those things simultaneously. So sometimes an organization will stick to the things that it knows it can do well and just focus on that. The power of the panda is that we can do a number of things very well when we're focused, and we see the intersections of those things. So nature is impacted by climate, climate is impacted by nature, and humans, the communities, are impacted by nature and climate, as well as impacting those things. So that niche, that overlap of those three things is a space where we are uniquely qualified and able to deliver impact and really have change for good. And I see it in the way that we design our work and the way that we deliver our work in a partnership model, because it's not enough just to partner with those who have nature, but also how do we to have that positive impact on nature? How do we help adjust the other things by having an impact on climate? Because these things are interrelatable, and humans, we're impacting everything.
Thanks, Nicole. That's great. Cliff, I'm going to come back to you, and then hopefully, Christine, we'll have some questions to work through with everybody. But you talked a number of times about dreaming, and for everybody, dreaming is super important, whether it's about dreaming about the future or processing what is happening in your world today. And so I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about that critical role of us as an Australian society dreaming about the future, which is more regenerative, which is more putting, I think, to what Nicole said, works at that interface between climate, communities, and nature, has that as the front, and how economy serves us and our planet. So Cliff, it's a tough question, but I thought it's a good, you kicked us off, so I'd love to bring it back to that.
Gee, dreaming, gee, that's a lot to sort of unpack, Dermot, but
after 16 years, I know you're up for it, Cliff. Come on.
Oh, my dreaming is always that, we shouldn't accept divided government. I think that there needs to be the political will in terms of addressing the issue at hand. Nick spoke before about the global solutions. Well, there is no global unless we get local right, tried and tested and proven. That speaks to the science. There's a simple premise when it comes to science. It speaks to our understanding of the natural and social world. So my dreaming is that, well, our dreaming is being returned to us by the fact that our state, in relation to First Nations peoples having a say in managing country, is slowly but surely improving. First world economy, first world nation. First Nations now are over 1 million when it comes to these, according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics. But we're still running first, Dermot, if you want to speak about dreaming. This is a nightmare when it comes to First Nations running first in life expectancy, infant mortality rates, incarcerations, domestic violence, chronic health, overcrowded housing. All of that speaks to the impact in intergenerational trauma, collective trauma of colonisation. The part of why I've stayed on for so long is that I truly believe that we have such a passionate group of people who do want to have that deep listening and apply the science, but more importantly, do it in a way that cultivates empathy, compassion, and those social and cultural changes that need to happen across all of society. And it's the good people who are listening to me, you and Nick today, who are understanding of that, but we need to grow that. Our friends who are listening today, they need to speak of what we're doing and why they're involved with the panda. Don't be, I mean, I'll go back, the NAIDOC theme this year was loud, black and proud. And I'm proud of that, but I think the panda needs to come up with that we're loud and we're proud and we're making mistakes, but we're learning from our mistakes. And that's why I'm getting goosebumps here. That's why I'm so proud to be a panda all day, every day. But in saying that, you've heard me say this too, Dermot, my people and my country before the panda, all day, every day too.
Yeah.
But what a wonderful organisation to work for.
Thanks so much, Cliff. Now, Christine, there's been a number of questions in there.
There has.
Should we grab a couple and work them through?
Absolutely. So Dermot and Cliff, you both touched on Australia's bid to host COP, but you didn't really talk much about that. Maybe to you, Dermot. So climate change is also high on Helen's mind. She sent through a question. She asked how species are adapting to habitat loss caused by climate change and what we're doing to support that adaptation. In particular, she was thinking a lot about bird life like glossy blacks, bristlebirds, and the plains wanderer.
It's a great question, and it picks up quite a lot of themes. So I might say something in Nicole. I might also pass to you and on that as well. Climate change is going to impact everything that we do as an organization. You know, we had this conversation with the board all this year. Climate change is going to be in everything that we do. And so whether often we do need to drive the transition to renewables faster, we need to work on a pathway to exit out of fossil fuels. That mitigation piece is super important, but creating bigger resilience for communities and for wildlife and nature is going to be super critical, whether that's in Australia or the Pacific or around the world. And so two things that I think are going to be super powerful in that space at a broader level, nature-based solutions. Nicole talked about those, and perhaps you could talk a little bit more, Nicole, about that as a way, whether that's in our work in the Kimberley, working in the Kimberley or in the Pacific, or in working with farmers in large landscapes in northern New South Wales, for example. And the second piece then is particular species that are going to really experience, changing ecosystems to which they are focused, their niche, the habitat is changing. And so it requires us to think very carefully about, as we try and restore and regenerate nature, how are we creating opportunities that allow for some of the unfortunate reality that, you know, the areas to which some of these both birds and animals and insects are going to change over the next 10, 20, 30 years. And so if I look at the work we're doing with koalas in northern New South Wales and building out koala corridors, we have a lens which says, where do we need to be putting those corridors that are going to build the strongest resilience for climate, how science is predicting climate's going to impact, whether that's greater flooding or different species that are going to be growing in some areas. So that has really driven some fundamental thinking where you think, well, that lowland habitat, which used to flood every 120, 30, 50, 100 years, 200 years, is now flooding every 5 years, and trees are just not going to survive there. So those are practical examples, but I think climate change needs to be in every aspect of the work that we're doing for the coming decades, both in terms of mitigation, but also adaptation resilience. So really great question. Nicole, anything to add to that?
I just love Helen's thinking, because those issues are so interconnected, and the work that we're doing on nature-based solutions about restoration of habitat and building resiliency really are the mechanisms that we get to so that we can ensure that threatened species that are impacted by these climate changes are really given the best chance possible. And so it's so ecosystem driven, but at the same time, it pulls back up to that global and local and global. So thanks for that great question, Helen.
We have had quite a few questions about challenges, which I know you all touched on during your conversation. Lorraine and Bernadine both asked about our key challenges. Veronica, Julian, and Rosemary have maybe touched on one of those challenges. They've all asked questions about the laws that are designed to protect nature in Australia while potentially allowing destructive practices. Could you comment on our environmental protection laws, whether they're adequate and what WWF is doing?
Cliff, you talked a little bit about that in government. Do you want to start on that high level, and then maybe Nicole, you and I can follow up with some, because it's a very topical question at the moment as well. But Cliff, do you want to build on what you said before?
Obviously, there's the political will, and I think that the panda can tell a story around advocating for real and meaningful transformational change when it comes to protecting the environment. One thing that came out of the Black Summer Royal Commission was that there was an understanding that First Nations knowledge is part of the nature-based solutions agenda moving forward. So that speaks to policy, it speaks to the legislative sort of things that are happening down in places where democracy works. You know, I'm not gonna pile on those who jump into the public square. I applaud them and commend them for that, and the scrutiny that comes with all of that. But we should never ever let those spaces and places, whether it be 1 William Street or in Sydney or the house on the hill there in Canberra, we should never ever let them turn into the political graveyards where good ideas go to die. We need to make sure that we push them all day, every day. We need to be surgical and tactical when it comes to trying to influence that change through our political processes. So that speaks to both sides of the aisle and everybody in between. And I think we do a really good job at that, Dermot. Obviously, you're well versed in the tools that you apply when you go to knock on those doors in Canberra. But boy, gee, there's got to be political will, and that can only be driven by the fact that democracy, you deserve what you get. So as soon as when you walk into those booths, it's all on you, my friend.
Here's the thing. 86% of Australians, according to a recent YouGov poll, actually want stronger nature laws. So it really is up to every one of us to make sure that we hold all governments to account to get those stronger nature laws, and to call upon those who are in those positions of privilege of making the laws for our countries and our states and our councils to know what you think is important. We were very disappointed that the nature laws were not passed in the final week of the sitting of federal parliament. And there was a critical reform in there, our first independent environment regulator, so that mechanism was not able to be established. And so for us, that's a key reform that we'll continue to work on, and we are hopeful in the not too distant future that we can actually affect that change. But we need all of your support to let all of those people that you voted for know that this is really important to you.
Yep, I think that's really important. I was in Parliament that week I think we were bitterly disappointed. Having 25,000 people sign WWF's petition is incredibly powerful as I go to talk to politicians about why this is important, and to reinforce Nicole's point. The vast majority of Australians want strong nature laws. There is a small group, particularly in WA, in the mining sector, who did not. And I think that it's our job to say to our local politicians, no, you can't listen to vested interests. Nature and communities come first in that. So I thank you all for signing that petition. Christine, I'm going to hand back to you. I'm looking at the time. How are we doing?
If you're able to stay on for a few more minutes, I do have a couple more questions, and hopefully any supporters that can stay for 5 minutes or more, and we'll send the recording around to anyone who does need to jump off. Is that okay for you three?
Yeah,
Thank
I'm
you.
looking for the numbers. We're still strong, so let's keep
We're
going.
still strong, yeah. So Kazoo has asked about our partnerships. So we've spoken a little bit about partnerships, and he's wondering about partnerships and collaborations other than with First Nations. Could you expand a little bit more on maybe the way we work with partners and what other partners we might work with?
Yeah, I might start with one. And Nicole, you're new, so you might actually have some insights on some new partnerships or new eyes on our partnerships that we have. But the one I was going to talk a little bit about is a project that we started 4 or 5 years ago, and it has the worst name ever, which is called MECLA, it's on Materials and Embedded Carbon Alliance. And it is based on the theory that unless we change the way that we build our infrastructure, our offices, our homes, we're not going to be able to reduce the impact both on climate and on nature because of the impact or the footprint that we all have. And so it is a platform that we started working with the construction industry along the whole supply chain, from people that finance the construction industry through to the lend leases who build infrastructure, through to government departments that provide the rules around how construction is made, through to the producers, everyone from blue steel through to the big concrete suppliers. And it's a pre-competition R&D knowledge exchange platform that allows the sector to share solutions that are going to drive the transition to low or zero carbon and nature positive solutions in the Australian construction sector. And 4 years on, we have 350, 400 companies involved in that, most state governments, the federal government, the research bodies and universities. And we are now just one of the stakeholders, although one of our staff member is actually the chairperson of the organization, that is a volunteer organization of dozens of corporate practitioners who volunteer their time to keep this MECLA network alive. And I think that's a really good way about how we lean into trying to try and solve what is often described as unsolvable problems that I talked about, but also our role is always evolving, and we need to be agile, where it's not about us as an organization. We help to kick this off. Now we are just one of the participants and play a catalytic role to keep the innovation and the collaboration going. And I think it's a really nice example of us working in partnership indirectly with literally hundreds and hundreds of companies that are going to be critical to making the transition to that nature positive zero carbon economy.
That's a really great example, and it makes me think of another example, which is around deforestation and conversion-free beef. So what I really have enjoyed about learning about these partnerships, because they are multiple. If you think about all of the players and stakeholders that get a piece of beef to somebody's tummy, okay, so it's from the farmers all the way through to the wholesalers, to the retailers, and to you and to restaurants, and so if you can imagine that entire system, the value of the supply chain, we are working again kind of in a supporting role for others to see their connections and their opportunities to be nature positive through that systems approach. And that's not just in Australia, but we're also doing it on the demand side with our colleagues in WWF Japan. So I think this is a really beautiful example of where we can take that holistic systems change approach and account for impacts on nature and climate through our consumption of beef. So I think that that's a really good example of how multiple systems levels of partnerships are creating change.
Thank you both. We are getting really close to time, so I'm just going to pose the last question. It's one we get often, actually. How can a busy person working a busy corporate career help WWF besides contributing funds? It's from an anonymous attendee, but I get this question all the time when I'm speaking to supporters. People want to do more. Dermot, I think Jamaica has prepared something for you to share along those lines.
Yeah, look, and it is a real question, and all of our supporters who provide financial support to us are just amazing, that help us to do what we have been talking about today. Many of them also take some time to sign petitions, to answer questionnaires, and to really tell us about what they think and tell external audiences what they're passionate about. And so this little screen up here, which you can scan with your phone, that will take you to a petition which 25,000 other Australians have signed over the past year, that says we need strong nature laws. And we want to go back in the new year to the government and say, you got it wrong a few weeks ago, you need to put these laws into place. So the more you can do that. And the last thing is, yeah, there is a lot these days you can do in your busy life at home, but also at work. And I would just encourage you all to be passionate advocates, to say this is what your values are in terms of caring for wildlife, caring for nature and communities and First Nations, and to be an advocate for that message to, not only your friends and family at home, but also in the workplace as well. So I think, Christine, probably time to wrap up. I'm going to hand back to you, but since I've been facilitating a conversation with Nicole and with Cliff, I just wanted to also thank them. It's been a lot of fun chatting this through about some really important and super critical work that we need to go keep doing into 2025.
Thank you, Dermot. And thank you everyone who stuck with us 10 minutes over time. We really appreciate it. There are a few questions we didn't get to. We will get back to you after the event. So you'll be hearing from us if we didn't answer your question. But thank you again for joining, and thank you for all of your support. And have a very, very happy and safe holiday period.